I woke up and stared at my palm. A single line ran from the base of my thumb to my pinky finger. It was perfect, and it didn't match the one in my mirror. I tried to ignore it, but then I started seeing lines everywhere. They were in the floorboards, on my desk, even on my food. It was driving me insane. I had to do something about it. The following day, I went to see a doctor. He looked at my hand and told me that my worries were getting to me. That was it. My life was falling apart. My wife had left me. I had just lost my job, and now I had these lines. How could he not see that? I wasn't worried. I was terrified. I told him that I could uneven look at myself in the mirror because the cracks matched the lines on my palm. He said that I should try to relax and gave me some sleeping pills. That night I dreamed about those lines. They were coming out of my eyes and nose. They were wrapping around me like a snake. I woke up screaming, which made the lines on my palm appear even more prominent. I had to get rid of them somehow. I visited a dermatologist. She told me that there were no medical causes for the lines on my body or in the mirror. I asked her if there was anything that could help. She gave me some cream and told me to come back in 2 weeks. When I got home, I applied the cream to my hands. It smelled like lavender and made my skin feel soft. I put on gloves and pulled on a sweater. I wanted to hide my hands from everyone. I waited patiently for 2 weeks, but the only thing that changed was how dry my skin became. On my second visit, the dermatologist told me that my case was hopeless. I was desperate. I had never felt so low. I thought about ending my life. Maybe then I wouldn't have to see those lines anymore. But then I remembered my daughter. I couldn't leave her alone. She needed me. So I decided to keep living for her sake. Then I had an idea. What if I covered my hands all the time? Nobody would see the lines then, right? So I started wearing gloves everywhere. First, people at work asked me what was wrong with me. Then they just stopped asking. It made me feel isolated. But at least I could go on living my life. One afternoon, while I was drinking coffee at a park, I noticed a man sitting across from me. He kept taking off his jacket and putting it back on again. I thought maybe he was hot or had a nervous habit. But after a while, I realized that he was trying to hide his hands. They were covered with lines. I couldn't believe my eyes. Was I going crazy? Had he been following me? I wanted to scream, but then I saw that he wasn't looking at me. He was staring at his own hands. Did I really want to know the truth? Because knowing it would only make things worse. It would be better if the lines stayed a mystery. I decided to confront him. As I approached him, he stood up and started walking away. I called out to him, but he kept going. I followed him for several blocks until we came to a busy intersection. I stopped because I didn't want to cause a scene. He crossed the street and disappeared into the crowd. I didn't know what to do. Should I call the police? They wouldn't believe me. I was talking to myself about lines on my hands. I decided to go home. Maybe I really was going crazy. When I arrived, I noticed that the lines were different. Some were deeper, others lighter. It was like they were changing. I tried to stay calm, but I couldn't help it. I started pacing around my house. That's when I saw it, a small crack in the wall. As I stared at it, I realized that it was moving. Yes, it was growing larger and smaller, just like my lines. I had to take action. I cleaned the crack with a damp cloth and applied some glue. Then I put on some paint. I had to match the color of the wall exactly. It took me hours, but eventually I finished and stepped back to admire my work. The line was gone. For a moment, I felt a sense of accomplishment. I had faced my fears and won. But then I looked down at my hands and saw that the lines had multiplied. They were now all over my body, and then it hit me. The lines weren't just on my hands. They were everywhere, in the walls, in the floor, even in the windows. I was seeing them all around me. I was losing my mind. That's when I discovered the journal. It was filled with sketches of lines, patterns, and symbols that I didn't recognize. There were so many pages that I couldn't count them, and at the end, there was a key. It had strange markings on it. I looked around the house, but I couldn't find any locks that matched. As I continued searching, I found a loose floorboard in the basement. It was big enough for a person to fit under. I looked through a crack in the boards and saw a set of stairs leading down. I had to get to the bottom of this. So I removed the floorboard and started descending the stairs. They were cold and damp. The air grew colder as I went lower. After what felt like hours, I reached the bottom and found myself in a dark room. In the center, there was a table with a single chair. On the table was a notebook and a pen. I walked over and opened the notebook. The pages were blank except for one. It had a drawing of a keyhole. Below it, there was a message. It said, "If you want to stop seeing the lines, you must understand their language." I knew that I had to do something, but I wasn't sure what. I sat down in the chair and closed my eyes. Then I started to remember. These lines, they were everywhere in my life. I had seen them in the cracks of my house, in the wrinkles of my hands, even in the veins of my coffee. I had always ignored them, thinking they were just random occurrences. But what if they were trying to tell me something? I thought about all the messages I had received through my life, all the signs that I had ignored. I had been so focused on my problems that I hadn't stopped to think about the bigger picture. Suddenly it all made sense. These lines weren't just lines. They were a way of communicating with me, a way of guiding me to this very moment. I had to listen to what they were telling me. I opened my eyes and looked around the room. Everything seemed ordinary, yet I felt like I was being watched. I reached out and touched the wall. It was cold and hard, just like any other wall. But as I pressed my palm against it, something happened. The lines on my hand started to glow. As they glowed, the wall in front of me began to shimmer. I could see that it was made up of tiny cracks, just like the ones I had seen everywhere else. Oh, with trembling hands, I traced the lines on my palm along the wall. As I did, the shimmer grew brighter, and the wall started to fade away. I could see through it, and behind it there was a passage. I hesitated for a moment, but then I knew that I had to go through. This was the only way to stop seeing the lines. Taking a deep breath, I pushed aside the shimmering wall and stepped through.